Donald Trump is in Davos after months of arguments and build-up. His impeachment trial set to begin in the Senate later on Tuesday. Marwan Bishara is Al Jazeera's senior political analyst and is here to talk us through it all. Good to see you, Marwan. Given what we're hearing about this trial, the Senate controlled by the Republicans, Mitch McConnell setting down his rules as well, which is going to make it more difficult to bring more witnesses in or introduce new evidence. Are we looking at a very quick process?
So it seems, but there's a bit of a hiccup in the sense that yes, he wants and he insists on, and he's designing the whole process to be quick, but at the same time he's allowing certain votes in each and every phase. And if the four Senate squad Republicans, meaning the moderates among the Senate Republicans, like the senator of Maine or the senator of Utah and so on, decide to vote along with the Democrats to bring in the witnesses and the new evidence and so on and so forth, we can see this thing lasting slightly longer than what anticipated.
And is that potentially damaging, even though many are forecasting that given that the Republicans control the Senate, that Donald Trump inevitably will be acquitted? Will the presentation of new evidence, critically new witnesses, including potentially people who worked very close with him, as we know, Bolton being one of them, is that potentially going to do damage even if the president is acquitted?
Well, look, I mean, at this point in time, there's like almost three different I don't know, schools, let's say, in the United States. I'm trying to find the right word. Trends, strands. One basically says the president has not done anything wrong. This whole thing is hoax. That's what the president trumps all the time.
Shouldn't even be a trial, is what his defenders are saying.
And then there's the other says he's guilty, as charged, must be brought to justice, and so on and so forth. I think what you're talking about is the bigger, greater school in the middle that really will be deciding the next elections, is the one a lot of them are saying, look, he might be guilty, but even if he's guilty, is this impeachable? So shouldn't it be just censure? Second, if really a lot of the new evidence is relevant, shouldn't we be listening to it, all of us senators and the American public? And I think that's what the four moderate, so-called centrist Republicans are discussing in closed doors the last few days, is to see whether this is really merits breaking away from the majority of Republican senators in order to insist that this is more important. And these people, and I think a lot of the constitutional lawyers in America, are insisting on something. It's a very simple idea that it was John Adams that came up with more than 200 years ago. Is this a government of the people? It is a government for the people, by the people, but it's the government of laws. And laws must be respected regardless of who the person is, a president, a senator, a congressman, or whoever. And I think this idea, this trend, if it succeeds to say this is a government of laws and we want to see if the president respected the law or not, if this goes through, it will be quite damaging.
And all of this, of course, set against the backdrop of this is an election year. What impact is that likely to have if we look at the Democrats as well? Donald Trump's already branding them the do-nothing Democrats. Yeah. You know, these are people who are trying to drive me out of office. How do the Democrats counter that? Well,
I think this is what you would say, enter Davos, right? I think the whole idea of coming to Davos, and I think this was very clever to come to Davos, to say to the Democrats are stuck with their little dirty business, as it were.
And I'm the president.
And I'm not only the president, I'm presidential. And not only presidential, I will be here 2 years after I was in Davos 2 years ago. And 2 years ago in Davos, I told the world why A, B, and C, and now I'm going to tell them why I succeeded in A, B, and C, why the economy is still working, why we are prosperous, why we are still open for business. And the idea of lecturing, boasting to the world business and political leaders not only is an important contrast with what's going on in Washington in as far as Trump is concerned, it is also an important antidote to what is going on in Washington.
Marwan, this is a question I just put to James Bayes. I'd like to get your thoughts on this as well. How does the rest of the world, particularly this region, see this impeachment trial? How do we see Donald Trump responding to this? Because the president has greater powers, greater reach internationally in foreign affairs than he does in domestic affairs. How does the world see it? And how will Donald Trump use this potentially on an international stage? You
know, generally speaking, even in comedy shows, the few that they are, few and far apart in the region, there's a general sense of envy, of course, and of how the contrast is so huge between what goes on in America and what's going on in our region, whereby it's very, very difficult, impossible, to put any leader through such process. You know, can you imagine a Sisi or a monarch or an authoritarian or a dictator being put to such process? In the Middle East, people tend to kill hundreds of thousands of people before it's even posed the question whether they need to step aside or not. So I think there's a lot of envy to what's going on in America. But in as far as the effectiveness of the American president, I think it's clear to everyone that the American president is not as present as he could have been if there's no process, that this president will only be interested in anything that goes on internationally in as much as it serves him to win the next elections. He will not get involved in anything. He will not waste time on anything that does not serve him winning the next election. Because we all know that assume that if he doesn't win the next elections, his future in America might be quite fragile.
Well, Marwan, we could be hearing from Donald Trump. We're expected to hear from him very soon. When we do, we'll get you back to talk about that. Thank you, Marwan Bishara, there, Al Jazeera senior political analyst.